two global superpowers, one on the rise, the other defending its dominance. The United States and China are locked in a complex and high-stakes rivalry, shaping the future of global politics, economics, and military power. Some call it a new Cold War, but is it really the same as the US-Soviet standoff of the 20th century? Or is this an entirely different kind of confrontation? Unlike the Cold War, where the US and Soviet Union had little economic connection, today's US-China rivalry plays out in a deeply intertwined world. Trade wars, technology battles, and economic sanctions have become the front line of competition. From disputes over tariffs to restrictions on semiconductors, both nations are using economic leverage to assert their influence. But it's not just about money. Military tensions are rising, especially in the South China Sea and over Taiwan. The US strengthens alliances in the Indo-Pacific, while China expands its military presence and challenges American influence. Cybersecurity, espionage, and influence campaigns add another layer to this high-stakes competition. The big question: could this rivalry spiral into something far more dangerous? While both nations want to avoid direct military conflict, history shows that tensions between superpowers can escalate in unpredictable ways. Managing this competition without turning it into a full-blown confrontation will be one of the defining challenges of the 21st century. The original Cold War was a battle of ideologies, capitalism versus communism, with the constant threat of nuclear war looming in the background. The US and the Soviet Union rarely fought directly, but their competition played out through proxy wars, espionage, and a relentless arms race. It was a struggle for dominance, defined by political ideology and military might. But today, the US-China rivalry is different. It's not just about military power, it's about technology, economics, and global influence. Unlike the Soviet Union, China isn't trying to spread communism across the world. Instead, it's using a different kind of power, economic leverage, technological supremacy, and massive infrastructure projects to expand its reach. Take China's Belt and Road Initiative, a vast network of investments in roads, ports, and digital infrastructure spanning dozens of countries. Through these projects, China isn't just building highways, it's building influence, securing access to resources, and deepening economic ties with nations across Africa, Asia, and beyond. Then there's the race for technological dominance. From artificial intelligence to 5G networks and semiconductors, the US and China are locked in a battle over who will control the most advanced industries of the future. American efforts to restrict China's access to cutting-edge technology, such as advanced chips and AI algorithms, reflect just how crucial this battle has become. And unlike the Cold War, where nuclear deterrence kept both sides from direct conflict, today's competition is more complex and unpredictable. Cyber warfare, economic sanctions, and supply chain disruptions have become the weapons of modern conflict. Instead of missiles, nations fight through data, trade restrictions, and digital surveillance. So, is this rivalry more dangerous than the original Cold War? Some experts say yes, because this time, it's not just about military standoffs or nuclear threats. It's about who controls the future itself. The stakes are enormous, and the outcome will shape global power for decades to come. The US-China rivalry isn't just one battle. It's playing out across multiple fronts, from trade wars to military tensions to the race for technological dominance. These conflicts aren't isolated. They're all connected, shaping the future of global power. Trade and economic war. Since 2018, the US has imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, and China retaliated with its own tariffs on American exports. But this is more than just a trade dispute. It's a struggle over economic supremacy. The real battleground? Semiconductors, rare earth minerals, and tech giants like Huawei. Semiconductors are the backbone of modern technology, powering everything from smartphones to advanced AI. The US has banned exports of high-end chips to China, aiming to slow its technological rise. Meanwhile, China dominates the supply of rare earth minerals, which are essential for manufacturing electronics, electric vehicles, and even military hardware. This economic war extends into the digital space. The US has blacklisted Huawei, fearing its 5G networks could be used for Chinese espionage. And apps like TikTok have come under fire for potential data collection on millions of Americans. In response, China is pouring resources into developing its own self-sufficient tech industry to reduce reliance on the West. Military tensions, the South China Sea, and Taiwan beyond trade and tech, military tensions are also rising. One of the biggest flashpoints is the South China Sea, a vast, strategically critical region through which 1/3 of global trade flows. China claims nearly the entire South China Sea, building military bases on artificial islands and defying international rulings that reject its claims. This has put Beijing in direct confrontation with its neighbors. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and others, as well as the US, which conducts freedom of navigation patrols to challenge China's control. But the most dangerous flashpoint of all? Taiwan. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province, while Taiwan sees itself as a self-governing democracy. Beijing has vowed to take Taiwan by force if necessary, and Chinese warplanes regularly fly near Taiwan's airspace in shows of force. The US, meanwhile, has long maintained a policy of strategic ambiguity, not officially recognizing Taiwan as independent, but still arming it and hinting that it would intervene militarily if China invades. This creates a high-stakes situation. If China moves on Taiwan, it could draw the US and its allies into a direct military conflict. Tech and AI dominance. At the heart of this rivalry is the battle for technological dominance. The country that leads in AI, 5G, quantum computing, and biotech will shape the future of the global economy and military power. China is spending billions to become the world leader in AI and mass surveillance technologies. Facial recognition, big data analytics, and autonomous drones are just some of the areas where China is making rapid advances. Meanwhile, the US is trying to block China's access to the most advanced technology, restricting exports of high-end AI chips and banning Chinese companies from buying American-made semiconductors. The race for quantum computing is also heating up. Whoever cracks quantum first could break modern encryption, giving them access to sensitive government and corporate secrets worldwide. Both nations know that winning in tech means winning in the global balance of power. Global influence: Africa, Latin America, and the Belt and Road Initiative. While the US backs democracies and traditional allies, China is expanding its influence through economic power, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. One of its most powerful tools, the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Through this massive infrastructure project, China is investing in roads, ports, railways, and digital networks across dozens of countries. These investments give China political leverage, as nations that take Chinese loans often find themselves indebted, sometimes forced to give up control of strategic assets when they can't repay. Critics argue that this is a form of economic imperialism, allowing China to expand its influence without firing a single shot. The US has responded by strengthening ties with allies and pushing back against Chinese influence in key regions. Unlike the Cold War, where the US and Soviet Union had little economic connection, the US and China are deeply economically intertwined. Their economies are not just competitors, they're also dependent on each other. Take Apple, for example, one of the world's most valuable companies. Its products are designed in the US, but most of its manufacturing happens in China. Companies across industries, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, and consumer electronics, rely on Chinese supply chains to keep costs down and production running. Meanwhile, China holds over $1 trillion in US debt, a massive amount of US Treasury bonds. This means China has a financial stake in America's economy, while the US relies on China to buy its debt and help stabilize global markets. Because of this deep economic connection, a full decoupling where the US and China completely separate their economies could be disastrous. If US companies suddenly pulled out of China, it could lead to higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and economic instability. And if China stopped buying US debt, it could send shockwaves through global markets. But while both sides benefit from this economic relationship, the risks are growing. Trade tensions, sanctions, and restrictions on technology exports have already begun pushing the two economies apart. And the biggest flashpoint? Taiwan. If China invades Taiwan, or if the US takes extreme measures to block China's rise, this economic rivalry could turn into something far worse: a direct military conflict. A war between the world's two largest economies wouldn't just hurt them, it could destabilize the entire world. The question remains, will competition turn into confrontation? Or can these two superpowers find a way to manage their rivalry without disaster? The future of global stability may depend on the answer. Despite rising tensions, some experts argue that conflict between the US and China isn't inevitable. While they may be rivals in trade, technology, and military power, there are still areas where they work together. Take climate change. Both nations are the world's largest polluters, but they've also collaborated on clean energy initiatives and emissions reduction goals. During global health crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, scientific communities in both countries shared critical research on vaccines and treatments. These moments of cooperation show that even in a heated rivalry, there's still room for diplomacy. But that space is shrinking. Nationalism is rising on both sides. In China, Xi Jinping's government promotes a vision of national strength, pushing back against what it sees as Western interference. In the US, politicians from both parties are increasingly united in seeing China as a threat, whether it's on trade, technology, or security. With both governments hardening their positions, compromise is becoming more difficult. And that raises the big question: can the US and China find a way to coexist? Can they remain rivals without turning into outright enemies? Or are we heading toward a new era of global division, where the world splits into competing spheres of influence, much like the Cold War? The choices these two nations make in the coming years will shape the world for generations. The US-China rivalry is unlike any superpower conflict we've seen before. It's not just about military strength or ideological differences. It's about who controls trade, technology, and the global economy. Unlike the Cold War, where the US and Soviet Union were largely isolated from each other, the US and China are deeply connected economically, yet increasingly at odds in almost every strategic area. The question remains: will this rivalry escalate into full-scale conflict? Or can the world's two biggest powers find a way to coexist without catastrophe? The stakes couldn't be higher, and the outcome will define the 21st century. Let me know in the comments, and if you found this breakdown helpful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more deep dives on global politics.